Putting out another ranking video today. We're kind of in a lull of the season where there's stuff coming out around Christmas, but these past 2 weeks there's been a lot of show premieres, so I don't really want to keep doing single episode reviews. I think I'm just going to wait for full seasons of these shows to wrap up before I review them. So I'm kind of looking for something to fill the time, so I decided today we're going to start a 3-part series of my top 30 favorite movies. So today we're going to be talking about numbers 30 through 21, and also I have a cold, my 2-year-old's sick, so if I sound like an asshole, that's the reason. But yeah, let's jump into this. I hope you guys enjoy it. Alright, coming in at number 30 is Gladiator. I wish I could put this higher because I do really love this movie, but this is a list of top 30 and there's so many movies on this list that I love, obviously. So something had to be last. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I just reviewed Gladiator 2 on the channel, so check that out if you haven't. And I talked a lot about Gladiator 1, I feel like, in there, so if you want to kind of get my full in-depth feelings on that movie, you can jump over there and check it out. But this movie's great. I think it's probably, I go back and forth on these Ridley Scott top 2s. It's probably this and Alien for me. It could go any way depending on the day. But this movie's awesome. There's not a lot of movies I feel made about this era in our planet's history. When there is, they're not very good. Like Clash of the Titans. Like, I know that's Greek compared to Roman, but it's kind of around the same time frame. And I know I think there was a show on HBO maybe, but it only lasted like 2 seasons before it was canceled. But it's hard to come across something about ancient Rome in today's like media world. And Ridley Scott does it so well. I know he gets a lot of heat for not being historically accurate, which I don't really give a shit about. It's a movie, and he took a lot of creative liberties, and that's fine because it's an awesome movie. The action's great. The set pieces are incredible. The visuals are amazing in this film. Cinematography is great, and the story is fantastic. It's one that kind of stands the test of time. It's all about your every man that kind of rises up after being betrayed by the government he lived and worked and fought for his entire life. And he dies, sacrifices himself to inspire the people to create a better world. And it's a poignant message. So yeah, coming in at number 30 is Gladiator. In at number 29 is La La Land. So 2 things about this. I know some people are kind of iffy on musicals. I've always enjoyed them, not all of them. I mean, I'll be the first to admit there are a lot that I don't enjoy. But this one I loved. Just kind of like the throwback to old Hollywood and like how these movies used to be crafted and made with musical numbers as well as drama. And it was just like the atmosphere and the aura of this movie is just like delightful to rewatch. I think the story's good. It's a love story, but it's a love story that doesn't end with a happy ever after, which is a nice change of pace. I mean, these two fall in love, they fall out of love, and then they kind of find their paths in life. And it's sad, but sort of uplifting because at the end they realize that if they never would have found each other, they probably never would have gone down these paths to success that they have equally. So it's a uplifting story ultimately in the end. I think the casting's great. I mean, Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone, both awesome. They're both, all the musical numbers and the dancing numbers are so much fun. Chazelle's one of my favorite directors working today. I know people did not like Babylon. I loved it. Every movie he's made for me has honestly been a hit. And this movie's one of them. And I know when this movie came out, it was very popular. People loved it, but then there was kind of an outcry of people who were like, oh, this movie's overrated. And that's fine. Like, if you're not into musicals, if you think this movie's kind of just like overhyped, I mean, that's fine. I always enjoy it, and I enjoy rewatching this just because of the pure fun that I get watching this movie. And it's a fun movie for people who like have big dreams and things like that to watch. That's what the whole point of this story is to chase your dreams and don't let, obstacles stand in your way. And sometimes you have to drop the things you love the most to be able to become successful towards those dreams. And it's an inspiring story. And that's why I like it. At number 28 is The Lion King. I really wanted to do the opening song, just screaming at the top of my lungs to open up this part, but since my throat is killing me, I could not do that. But anyway, not only do I believe this is one of the greatest animated movies of all time, I think it's one of the best movies of all time. It's just so good. It's a classic. I know people are always just like, oh, this is rip off Hamlet. I don't give a shit, okay? To be honest with you, I think that Hamlet and Shakespeare are overrated, all right? I had to read a ton of Shakespeare in high school. I hated it. It's just nonsense. So it's cool to inspire this story, but I don't care. I'd rather watch this and enjoy this because it is so enjoyable. The characters are awesome. It's funny. It's dramatic. The animation still, even though this is from like 1993, it holds up. It's still a beautiful movie. You have James Earl Jones and Jeremy Irons, who both have just iconic voice performances in this movie. Look, that live action remake they made a few years back is garbage, and quite frankly, I cannot stand all of these live action remakes of classic Disney films. I think it's stupid and just a waste of time. But the thing that really upset me was like, okay, you bring James Earl Jones back, perfect. I don't think you should have done it any differently. But then you recast Scar, which never made sense to me. Like, I think Jeremy Irons is as iconic as Scar as James Earl Jones is as Mufasa. But that's just my opinion. But this movie is fantastic. My 2-year-old son is really into this movie, as well as one of the other animated movies that's going to be higher on this list right now. And he cannot get enough of it. He sings along with it. Hakuna Matata, he loves it. And it just brings out even more enjoyment for me as a dad now, because I kind of get to watch and enjoy him watching it, which is always fun. It's like those fatherly moments you always look forward to before you become a parent. And yeah, I love this movie. It doesn't miss a beat. It's, 30 years old at this point, more than 30 years old, and it just still holds up. It's a fantastic animated movie, and it's a fantastic all-around movie. In at number 27 is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This is going to be one of 2 Tarantino movies on this list. Tarantino is one of my favorite directors of all time, and he's made some really fantastic movies. I think all of his movies, except for the Death Proof double feature, are good. I've never been a fan of that whole double feature. Just not for me. But all of his other movies I've always enjoyed. Even if I don't love them, I still really like going back and rewatching them. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is great. I think it's up there with Pulp Fiction for the movies with Tarantino behind them. I know some people didn't care for it because it was too meandering, but I loved it. I loved just getting to live and enjoy this world of classic Hollywood. I always love seeing that. I've always been fascinated by that time period in Hollywood. This period where movies really just started to take off and become these blockbuster hits, and these actors that became movie stars. We don't really have a ton of movie stars nowadays. It's weird to say, but like somewhere around the time when I was in high school, it kind of flipped. I feel like movies nowadays get more hype and get booked more off of either the reputation of the director or of the narrative of the movie itself, which is good. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I feel like when I was growing up, especially when I was a kid, you would see movies that would come out and would get sold solely based off the movie star that was in them. A la like Schwarzenegger and Stallone back in the day. You used to see movie posters with their name just plastered all over it, and you'd be like, I don't know what that movie's about, but I'm going to go see it. Nowadays, I feel like we don't really get that outside of like Tom Cruise. He honestly might be the last great movie star. But I really enjoyed just going back and seeing this era of Hollywood. I think it was so good. And the way Tarantino kind of hilariously tied this into Charles Manson and his cult, and how Leo's story kind of, he's this struggling TV actor who's kind of being pushed out of the business because he's getting older and nobody really wants his talent anymore. And he's hoping to go out on top with this big, one last big hurrah. And his last big hurrah is taking out these assailants that break into his house and try to murder him. It's hilarious, and I know, like, that upset some people because it's revisionist history or whatever, but, like, I don't care. It's a movie. Who gives a shit? This movie's fun. It's hilarious. It's got all the Tarantino antics in it, and I really, really enjoy it. In at number 26 is one of my favorite comedies of all time, which is Superbad. This is going to be one of two comedies that appear on this list. They honestly, I know people say this all the time, and it's kind of cliche, but, like, they really do not make comedies like this anymore. And I feel like comedy as a genre isn't really that big anymore. It's turned into more of like action comedy, dramedy, space comedy. It's all combined with different genres. I don't feel like you can do these like straight up comedic films anymore. At least nobody tries, in my opinion. But this movie, it's incredible. I think it's one of the funniest comedies ever made. This came out in an era when we were getting like a good comedy every year. You had like this. Will Ferrell was kind of in his prime with like Talladega Nights, Semi-Pro, Anchorman. You were getting stuff like Tropic Thunder. Like, in my opinion, like the heyday of comedy movies. Like, those are some of the best that have ever been put to film. And I think this one is one of the best. I think Jonah Hill and Michael Cera are incredible in these roles. They are absolutely hilarious. Their relationship as best friends is so believable, and they play off each other so well. And how they gang up on McLovin and just fucking roast him all the time. Like, all three main characters, their chemistry is electric. There's so many other actors in this movie that I always forget about too, like Seth Rogen and Bill Hader. Bill Hader, this movie kicked him off as like one of my favorite comedic performers. He is so funny in this, and I just love like the scenes with him and Seth Rogen and McLovin are hilarious. This whole movie, and the main narrative is great too. Like I mean I had this experience when I was getting ready to graduate high school, and like I had a lot of friends. I was worried about going off to college, and like our relationships just being just absolutely just destroyed because of like the distance and everything like that, and it can be a really stressful time, and I think that really plays through in this movie along with the comedy. I mean, it's no mistake that like Seth Rogen wrote this while he was in high school, so you really feel that come out through this movie, and it's one that I've always appreciated. For a long time, whenever I had to fly anywhere, I would always watch this on a flight just because it's a great way to pass like 2 hours or whatever. So it's kind of my go-to movie in that respect. But yeah, one of the best comedies ever made in my opinion. Superbad. Number 25, another classic in my mind. I know it wasn't a classic when it was first released, more of a cult classic after, in the years that followed. But at number 25, we have Pulp Fiction. Another one of these movies, kind of like Gladiator. I wish I could put this higher. It's just there's so many movies on this list that I love. This movie launched Tarantino's career into what it is today. I mean, this movie is amazing. There's so many little like twists and turns, and the way the story is structured, you're constantly guessing like, okay, so where are we at now, and how does this tie into what we just saw? And it keeps you on your toes. It's very engaging in that way. And the cast is amazing. I mean, you have Travolta in his prime, Sam Jackson, Uma Thurman, Harvey Keitel. You got Bruce Willis. You got Ving Rhames. Everyone always forgets that Ving Rhames is in this film, as well as Christopher Walken. Christopher Walken's also in this film, and he's awesome. I know he's only in it for like a few minutes, but he's great. Tim Roth. I mean, the cast is undeniable. And the writing, like, this is one of those movies that got me, I would say it's one of like 5 movies that were responsible for like crafting my love of movies. Now, this movie came out when I was like probably 3 or 4. And granted, I probably didn't watch it till I was like in middle school, if I had to guess. So I probably shouldn't have been watching it at that time, but I did. And it, like, I fell in love with the way this movie's structured, because what Tarantino did for this movie, for like someone like me, any movie I had seen before this, narratively they were crafted in such a way where it was pretty straightforward storyline. This movie is responsible for really opening my eyes to what and how a narrative could be structured. The way this movie is written, it's structured in such a way that you don't really know where the main thread is going until everything climaxes. And it's brilliant. It keeps you engaged and on your toes. There's a lot of the directors that do this nowadays. I mean, Nolan's one of them as well. Their story is structured in such a creative way to not allow you to view the whole narrative at one certain point and to know what's coming. And this movie, like I said, opened my eyes to how that could be done. And I really appreciated this movie in that respect. It's just great. It's a fun movie. The performances are great. The direction and writing is incredible. And it's just got so many iconic sequences. Sam Jackson spouting off the biblical verses is always just like, everyone remembers that scene. It's an amazing film, and I wish I could put it higher. At number 24 is Saving Private Ryan. Another one of these movies from my childhood that I really give credit to was spurring my love for films. Again, probably not a movie I should have been watching when I was a kid, but I watched it nonetheless, and I love this movie. Like, there's so many scenes in this movie that just like are constantly just, they stick in my mind, because the direction that Spielberg did with this movie is just downright incredible. I mean, we've all heard like so many, you know, the screenings, so many veterans came up and said like this is the first movie that reminded them of what like brotherhood is, and also like the opening scene when they, you know, come down on the beaches in Normandy. It reminded these veterans so much of like that event and just their experience fighting in this war. And granted, I understand that like there's a lot of pieces of this movie you can pick apart with not being very realistic or accurate in the sense of war, or like, you know, grenades exploding, things like that. But just the way that this movie was filmed and the imagery and, you know, the emotion behind it, like it's a classic war movie with its flaws, you know. There's just so many emotional moments in this film with such visceral imagery that they've always stuck with me. Everybody always talks about the opening Normandy beach scene, and I get it. That is an iconic scene, probably the most iconic scene in any war movie ever made, and it deserves to be. It's insanely good how it's directed, how it's acted, and the detail that they put into it. It's all amazing. But there's other ones in this movie too that I think kind of get overlooked because of that scene. The scene where Wade takes a grenade and they're trying to all help him and they don't know what to do but let him die because that's all they can do. There's a scene in the climax in the town when the Germans are descending on them where Upham is trying to run more ammo up to Fish, and I can't remember the other guy's name that's up in that bedroom with him. But he stops on the staircase and just listens to Fish and the other guy get murdered by a German soldier. The German soldier he let go earlier in the movie. And it's just heartbreaking. And that scene is just like, it's so real. I remember that scene all the time. It's like one of those gruesome scenes in movies that always sticks with me. And I'm not saying that you should love this movie because of that, because it's an awful scene. Like when you delve into it. But it's just shows how good Spielberg's direction was, especially visually in this movie. And just the cast again, just amazing. You know, Tom Hanks, one of the greats. Tom Sizemore, R.I.P. You got people like Vin Diesel before he became, you know, just like a joke. And there's just so many like character actors in this movie too. Giovanni Ribisi, Barry Pepper, Adam Goldberg, these guys that like pop up in things, and like they're never going to be your leading man, but they're always good, and they're great in this. Matt Damon, obviously. There's so many cameos, too. There's like Bryan Cranston, Nathan Fillion, freaking Ted Danson at one point. It's wild. Not only is this movie just like amazing because it's visuals, it's amazing because it really highlights the bond of brotherhood, not only between actual biological brothers, but also between the brothers that you make on the battlefield. And it's such an emotionally resonant movie that, like, every time I watch it, it stuns me. And for that reason, that's why it's coming in at number 24. In at number 23 is Babydriver. This is my favorite Edgar Wright film. I love Edgar Wright. I know a lot of huge Edgar Wright fans kind of put this towards the bottom of their list. I never really understood why. Like, I get all of his movies are good and I enjoy them all, but like, I love this one. Mainly, the biggest thing for me, the biggest aspect is like the sound and music design. The way the action is structured to go along with the music is just some of the best I've ever seen in film. It's incredible and it's so enjoyable. And I just feel like the action sequences in this movie are so unique and just so well thought out and choreographed, and you don't really see a lot of car driving action in movies outside of like Fast and Furious, and that whole goddamn franchise has really gone off the rails. And so it's cool just to see like a movie dedicated to that style of action. And again, like, we're getting into these movies that just have amazing casts, like John Hamm, Kevin Spacey. Like, I know he doesn't seem like he's a great guy, but like, he's such an incredible actor. You have to separate the art from the artist. And then you have like Jamie Foxx, John Bernthal, Lily James, one of the best actresses working today in my opinion. And then you have people like Ansel Elgort and Isaac Gonzalez, who's like, they were kind of relatively unknowns at this point, and this movie kind of kicked their careers off. And all the performances are great. The writing and dialogue, of course, is amazing because it's Edgar Wright. He always makes like really witty, snappy dialogue, and the writing is always pristine. I just love this movie. It's a blast to return to. I think it's honestly one of the best action movies, if like, of the past decade. And I don't think among like Edgar Wright superfans that it gets enough love. It's a fun movie. In at number 22 is Captain America Civil War. I think this is one of the best, probably like top 5, 10 movies in the MCU. It's definitely my second favorite, and it's going to be one of two that pops up on this list from that franchise. This movie's just so much fun. I remember how hyped the marketing was for this movie before it came out. Like, that Super Bowl trailer where they revealed Spider-Man was going to be in it. I remember me and my roommates just freaking the fuck out. This movie's awesome. Like, it's just an awesome, fun, action-packed superhero movie with some surprising emotion thrown in throughout, and especially at the end. Look, I know the output of the MCU the past few years has been kind of questionable, honestly, ever since Endgame. And I get it. Like, it's been very inconsistent. And I will be, I'm a big MCU fan, but I will be the first to admit that. I will not argue that point whatsoever. But in its heyday, I remember when Endgame came out, I saw a review from a critic, I can't remember who, and their quote was that this franchise had become their Star Wars. And I remember that stuck with me so hard because, like, the original Star Wars trilogy, three of them, probably my favorite trilogy of all time. Like, that Star Wars is the reason I love movies. I remember one of my older brothers showing it to me when I was very young, and that's honestly one of the first movies I remember watching, and I fell in love with cinema because of that movie. But Star Wars, like the MCU, since that first trilogy has been, kind of up and down. And I wasn't alive in the 70s, and when Return of the Jedi come out, 82 maybe? Anyway, I wasn't alive then, so I never got to experience the marketing behind it, like the cultural impact that those movies had. The MCU, though, has really been that franchise in my lifetime. I was 18 when the first Avengers movie came out. I remember seeing that movie in theaters and being like, Jesus Christ, they did it. They pulled this off. And then I remember waiting the midnight showing for Civil War because I was like, this movie's going to be epic and it's going to change this franchise. Like and it did. I mean, all the events that happen in Infinity War and Endgame play out mainly due to the events in this movie. It's so emotional, man. I get emotional at the end of this movie every time because like you've been with these characters for so long, you care about these characters, and when Tony and Steve finally have to face off against each other and like, you know, throw down, and like they come to the point where they each almost kill each other, and it's just like you get emotional and you're just like, geez, man, this took a turn. And this got so many of our favorite heroes from this franchise in it just going at it. And Zemo, in my opinion, is such an underrated villain in this franchise. He just absolutely dismantles the Avengers, and he has zero powers, and it just seems like he barely lifts a finger. He's just a guy. He's a trained military special ops guy who just takes down an entire team of superpowered individuals, and it is wild. And like I said before, you get introduced to Spider-Man in this movie. We get introduced to Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther in this movie. Rest in peace. It's just great, man. The cast is huge. I know some people see it as like an Avengers 2.5. This to me really is a Captain America movie. Like, this is him and Bucky's story essentially, and Tony's, but like this to me, they did it in a way that it still feels like a Cap movie. And whatever qualms you have against the MCU nowadays, I get it, but Captain America Civil War is elite. Coming in at number 21 and rounding off the end of the first video in this series of my favorite movies is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I honestly don't think I've ever met anyone else who would consider this their favorite Harry Potter movie, but it's mine. And admittedly, I don't even think it's the best made Harry Potter movie. I think Prisoner of Azkaban for sure is the best made Harry Potter film. But this one's just my favorite. I think Prisoner of Azkaban leads into a darker turn for this universe. And I think Order of the Phoenix leads into kind of the epic finale of this universe. It's really, I think it turns the tides in this franchise as much as Prisoners of Azkaban does, and things get really dark. Like, Sirius dies in this one. You get just straight up like child torture from Professor Umbridge, who is just like, honestly might be the second best villain in this universe outside of Voldemort. Every time she's on screen, you just want to fucking just punch her right in the nose. Like, just such a brilliant performance by this actress, but like at the same time you hate her. You hate watching her on screen, and like it's just grueling watching her make Harry just like inscribe on his own skin. It's wild. And it's just, there's a lot in this movie to love. There's really good action. You get to see the old Order of the Phoenix come out and just like fight Death Eaters in the finale, and that's amazing. The Voldemort-Dumbledore standoff is incredible, especially visually. It's just amazing. And this movie really kind of kicks off the war in this universe. And like, I grew up on these books and movies. These are one of those franchises that it began when I was kind of like the prime age to take in something like this. And this franchise is near and dear to my heart. It's like, when I was growing up, this, Lord of the Rings, and the MCU were really the three franchises that kind of took hold of kids my age. And like, this whole universe, it's just so like, even in its darkest moments, it's just so joyful to return back to because of the magic that's infused within these movies. Like, it's amazing, and I there's not really a way to put it into words. Like, this franchise means a lot to me, and this movie has always been my favorite because of how emotional it gets and the events that it spurs behind it. So that's why it's my favorite. I know, like I said, I've never met anyone else whose favorite is Order of the Phoenix. It's usually like Azkaban or Goblet of Fire or even like Deathly Hallows, but this one is top of the line for me. So anyway, that's part 1 of this series I'm going to do of my top 30 favorite movies. So I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, like and subscribe if you haven't. I would really appreciate it. It just helps the channel, and yeah, watch out for the next 2. They should be coming soon.